"A darkness lies behind us," Bëor said, "and we have turned our backs upon it, and we do not desire to return thither even in thought. Westwards our hearts have been turned, and we believe that there we shall find light." With the race of elves awakening under starlight, revering it throughout all their time in Arda, it was the first rising of the sun that awoke the race of men. The Silmarillion tells us that in the eastward regions of Middle-earth, in Haldorian, men turned towards the sun in the west, the younger children of Iluvatar becoming a part of the world, children of the sun, brethren of the children of starlight. Many names they were then given: the Etani, the second people; Hildor, the followers; Apanonar, the afterborn, and many others. But much like the elves who awoke together in the east and were then sundered, following the summons of the Vala Orme to come to Valinor and the great journey itself, men too were sundered. And just as we can talk of elves as being part of groups and subgroups such as the Avari, Vanyar, Noldor, Teleri, Sindar, Nandor, Lyquendi, and so on, men can be divided into many groups, branches created from geography, decisions they made, kingdoms they founded, and lords they served. In this video I'm going to explore the legendary group of men of noble First Age houses, the Edain. It is part of my series exploring what I see as the three main branches of men descended from the first men. These houses are important in understanding the unfolding of Middle-earth's history. Which men chose to fight against Morgoth in the First Age? Which men were offered the reward that led to the formation of Númenor? Did any men refuse that gift? Were all men who didn't fight in wars against Morgoth evil? From whom do men of the Third Age descend? Who were the men who served Sauron and Melkor? These questions and many others will be answered through this exploration of these branches. Men of light, the Edain. Men of twilight, the middlemen. Men of darkness, the wild men. I think the best place to start with the Edain would be the name itself. We are told in the Silmarillion that the name Etani, the second people, was the name given to men in Valinor to the west, in the lore that told of their coming. To the east in Beleriand, the name became Edain, the Sindarin form of the Quenya Etani. Edain simply means men. You may recognise it as a part of the name Dunedain, Dun meaning west and Edain meaning men. Thus they are west men or men of the west. And yes, Edain can be applied to the entire race of men, but in Beleriand it was really used for the three kindreds of elf friends. Three noble houses of men who each arrived in Beleriand separately, but who became so close to the elves west of the Blue Mountains that they fought with them against the Dark Lord Morgoth in the Wars of Beleriand, which then led to a reward that would elevate them beyond the reach of all men, and to a disastrous downfall. It took 3 centuries for these men to reach Beleriand from their awakening in the east. The people journeying west at this time were seen as the vanguard of larger hosts moving west. Those 3 peoples were descendants of men in what Tolkien calls the Dark Ages of men's awakening, and were men who resisted Morgoth in the east or renounced him. Rumour had reached them of a great sea to the west, a place of light, and they wandered west in search of it and peace. Men in the east struggled in the fight against what Morgoth had bred, creatures and the rise of wicked men. Almost a forgotten history of their race, since the annals of history are so concerned with the troubles of the west of Middle-earth and with the men associated with elves. In the east, men who made Melkor their god sought to destroy his enemies to serve him, causing many of Morgoth's enemies to wander west and north. Even at a time when Morgoth no longer walked among them in the east, the war continued. And after men had arrived in the west, after centuries of resisting Morgoth and his servants, they were dismayed to find that peace was not in the west, but an ongoing war against Morgoth himself, declaring that, through ages forgotten, we have wandered, seeking to escape from the dominions of the Dark Lord and his shadow, only to find him here before us. Each of the 3 peoples, or 3 houses, were independent in their organisation and leadership, and they differed in speech, form, and bodily features, though all 3 showed traces of mingling with those who did not journey west. They were the House of Bëor, the House of Haleth, and the House of Hador, named after great leaders among them. The first men to cross the mountains and pass into Beleriand, They were met by Finrod Felagund in the year 310 of the First Age, in the Reckoning of Men. Both meet the other's respective kindred for the first time. Tolkien says that no more than 2,000 of them had passed into Beleriand, ill-equipped, but managing to undertake a painstaking journey with no beasts of burden, showing their great ability in dealing with hardship, something that would serve them and the Eldar well in the wars of Beleriand against Morgoth. The Silmarillion says that the men of that house were dark or brown of hair, with grey eyes. They were most like the Noldor, and were most loved by them, for they were eager of mind, cunning-handed, swift in understanding, long in memory, and they were moved sooner to pity than to laughter. So great was the House of Bëor that many of the legendary heroes of Men in Middle-earth can be traced back to it, either directly or through strong unions with other notable figures of great houses. Barahir, who alongside his men saved Finrod in the Dagor Bragolach, fourth of the great battles against Morgoth, leading to an oath of friendship between the king of Nargothrond and Barahir's line. An oath bound by an heirloom, the Ring of Barahir, a ring that makes its way through many lords and kings through the First, Second and Third Ages, until we see it worn by Aragorn in the War of the Ring, a symbol of honour, heritage, nobility and friendship, all of which I discuss in my video, Finrod, Heroes of the First Age. Beren, son of Barahir, Beren the Renowned, arguably the most famous of all heroes of men. His love of the elf Luthien gave rise to unions of elves and men, the strengthening of the race of men, and lines of kings throughout the ages. His quest for the Silmaril to win the hand of his love is a tale that is still told thousands of years after the fact. Once surrounded by myth and legend about the death of Beren, his return to life, and the power that love potentially holds over death and the afterlife. I recommend my video of Beren, Luthien and the Halls of Mandos, where I explore Beren's death and return. Even with the house itself ceasing to stand on its own following betrayal in the First Age, its legacy survived through not only Beren, but with other unions with other houses. And without the influence of this house, Middle-earth would not have seen the likes of Tuor, Elendil, Elros and Elrond, or even Aragorn. The children of Iluvatar may have remained somewhat estranged without that chance meeting of Finrod and Bëor the Old. Bëor had spoken with Finrod about others, and the first arrived soon after Finrod's departure. The people of Haleth in some accounts are said to be the third of the three great houses, and not the second. But it is said that they may have outnumbered the folk of Bëor, but arrived in smaller parties, hiding in the woods of Assyrian. There, the Green Elves showed no friendship to them. Morgoth was also aware of them and sent his servants to afflict them. They not only had strife with the Elves of Assyrian and Morgoth's forces, but also amongst themselves. Unlike the House of Bëor, the House of Haleth was not led to the west by Haleth. In their small groups they lived without rule by lords, each homestead governing itself, meaning they were slow to unite under any one banner. But the assault by servants of Morgoth united many under the banner of Haldad, a fearless leader who gathered brave men to protect women and children from an orc raid until food supplies were exhausted. Haldad was slain, but his daughter Haleth and son Haldar continued the defence until Haldar died in attempting to recover his father's body, leaving only Haleth as protector of her people. Then came the arrival of the elves led by Caranthir, one of the sons of Fëanor. Caranthir offered protection if they would dwell further north, but being proud and unwilling to be lorded over, something shared by their folk as a whole, Haleth refused, despite being thankful, saying, "My mind is now set, Lord, to leave the shadow of the mountains and go west, whither others of our kin have gone." So, the House of Haleth, despite once being united under Haldad, took its name after his daughter, the one who led them to the forest of Brethil, a place that was once part of Doriath, becoming a leader of them as a wider group. Haleth's folk were strangers to the other houses. Their language was alien, and despite uniting with them in conflict against Morgoth, their common enemy, they remained a people apart. Many did not cross the borders of the forest they dwelt in, and spoke Sindarin sparingly with outsiders. Haleth, the leader, was not unique in that she was a woman who was also a warrior, for the House of Haleth was renowned for having many warriors who were women, and for their bravery and prowess in battle. Being the most secretive of the houses, information on appearance is limited, but like the Folk of Bëor, there was a decline in numbers as the First Age drew to a close. Like most of Morgoth's enemies, they suffered greatly in the Nearnaeth Arnoediad, fifth of the great battles against Morgoth, and civil war sparked by Hurin of the House of Hador following his captivity in Angband led to heirs being scattered or slain after they had already suffered when Hurin's son Turin Turambar had led the dragon Glaurung to Brethil. Yet some of the Folk of Haleth did continue fighting in the war against Morgoth, and they did survive the War of Wrath. The most numerous of the men who arrived in the west were the Folk of Hador. It wasn't long after the arrival of the Folk of Bëor, the first of 3 hosts of Hador's folk arrived from the south. 2 others of similar strength then arrived before the year's end. Each host that arrived was said to be as large as the full host of Bëor's folk. They arrived prepared, with strength of arms, equipment, horses, sheep and goats. They had actually arrived a year or so ahead of others, but after reaching the Eredlindon, the Blue Mountains, they did not search for a pass, and instead took a road around the mountains. And just like the Folk of Haleth, this house was not named after the one who led them west. The Folk of Hador were descendants of Marach, the one who led them to the Blue Mountains to settle in Istalad in 313 or 314 in the Reckoning of Men. These dates are just an estimate and not especially reliable. But before Hador, this group would be known as Nothlir Maracha, or the Folk of Marach. It was his great-great-grandson that would have his name given to these folk. He made an alliance with Fingolfin of Hithlum, becoming Lord of Dorloman, through the authority of the High King of the Noldor himself, leading to the naming of the house. This house arguably is the most renowned when looking at all who descended from it. Hador himself, Hurin, Turin, Huor and Tuor. Through the marriage of the elf Idril and the man of this house Tuor, we have Eärendil, who essentially represented all 3 houses through his ancestry. And from him we have the kings of Númenor, and the kings of the realms in exile in Middle-earth through the Third Age. The men of the 3 houses throve and multiplied, but greatest among them was the House of Hador Goldenhead, peer of elven lords. His people were of great strength and stature, ready in mind, bold and steadfast, quick to anger and to laughter, mighty among the children of Iluvatar and the youth of mankind. Yellow-haired they were for the most part and blue-eyed, but not so was Turin, whose mother was Morwen of the House of Bëor. They were the tallest of the houses, even taller than elves, fair-haired, and readily allied themselves with the elves in the wars against Morgoth. They had divided when arriving west, reaching Greenwood the Great. Some passed north, which will become very relevant when discussing the Middlemen and Rohan's history. Some reached the Anduin and passed north to the Vales, some passing between the wood itself and the Grey Mountains. A smaller number did reach Beleriand, becoming known as brave and loyal men, haters of Morgoth, mastering horses and becoming fearless riders against the servants of the Dark Lord. And as you may have guessed, events in the First Age did their part to ruin this house too. Wicked men of the east all but enslaved the Folk of Hador following an invasion of Hithlum, a realm left almost without a defence after the disastrous Nearnaeth Arnoediad, with the brave men of Hador provided as great an army as they could muster to aid Fingon, son of Fingolfin. And in providing a defence for Turgon, the second son of Fingolfin, to retreat, their host was annihilated. Their actions here aided in the defeat of Morgoth later through those they protected at the cost of their own lives. Being the largest of the houses, they still outnumbered the others as the First Age drew to a close, and became the largest number of the Edain who accepted a great gift following Morgoth's defeat, and the largest number of those who would shape the greatest kingdom of men the world would ever see. These men who crossed the mountains as separate groups with their own languages, cultures and customs became the Edain, elf friends. Each became mingled with the others, giving rise to the most legendary, famous and infamous men in Arda's history. Each would play their part in the wars of Beleriand against the tyrant Morgoth, becoming involved in a devastating conflict that would only end when a descendant of all 3 houses, Eärendil, would plead for assistance for the race of men and the Noldor from the powers of the west in Valinor. And following Morgoth's fall, the island of Elena would be raised from the depths of the Great Sea. This was a gift offered to those men who remained true to the Elves and who suffered in centuries of war and terror with Morgoth. The kingdom of Númenor would be founded by those of the Edain who accepted the gift and followed the Star of Arundel to their new home. These men would become blessed by dwelling in their new realm, blessed by the leader of the host of the Valar himself, Eonwe, herald to the king of Arda, Manwe, and by elves sailing east, sharing their knowledge, gifts and wisdom. The Edain sailing west grew in stature, becoming the Númenorians, becoming unified as a distinctive and influential people in their own right, lords of the greatest realm ever conceived by the second born. Men of all three great houses become united as one even greater. None of this is possible without the migration of men to the west from under the shadow of Morgoth to the east. Brave wanderers who journeyed to find the light and found war, death and hardship through their enemy Morgoth, yet friendship with the firstborn. Their survivors are hardened by the experience and carry that experience and wisdom across the sea. The Edain came at last over leagues of sea and saw afar the land that was prepared for them, Andor, the land of gift, shimmering in a golden haze. Then they went up out of the sea and found a country fair and fruitful, and they were glad.